Welcome into the KSL Sports Front Page. I'm your host, Ben Anderson, beat writer for the Utah Jazz for KSL Sports, joined by Tom Hackett. Covers University of Utah, covers golf, covers RSL, and basically everything he needs to do, and we need him to do at KSLSports.com as well. You know him from his time playing at the University of Utah. Tom, thanks for jumping on to a very special edition.
Nick, thanks for having me, man. What a day it's been. Where do we even start?
Yeah, so the big news today, Ryan Smith, CEO of Qualtrics, is the new owner of the Utah Jazz, the new majority owner. He doesn't own the team outright. The Miller family is still going to be a part of that. But an enormous shift. And Tom, I don't think, as somebody who grew up in the state of Utah and has been around this team for a very long time, I did not see this day coming. I didn't think the Miller family was going to relinquish control of the team.
There are still so many questions, aren't there, Ben? And the statement in which the Millers and the Smiths both gave earlier today still left a lot of answers on the table. Obviously, there was a trust fund that was announced by Gail Miller in 2016. That hasn't been discussed yet. And it's worth noting, of course, for all our legal friends out there, that the transition in power, if you will, is still awaiting approval from the governors in the NBA. But all things are pointing towards the Smith family taking over proceeding. So just a seismic shift that really came out of nowhere, did it not?
Yeah, I suspect there's been some conversation about this, and I have theories on why it's happening now. I think there's a couple of reasons, and we'll talk about those coming up here in just a moment, Tom. But yeah, I think as far as the trust goes, obviously it's going to be dissolved. I mean, they're not going to own the team outright anymore. So if Ryan Smith decided he wanted to move the team or sell the team to someone else, he's going to have the ability to do that. That's why you want to have majority control like he's buying. I do think the fact that he's from the state of Utah I think you've reported, Tom, had offers to, or I've seen online, has had offers to go out and get involved in other professional purchases. I know he's been rumored with the RSL purchase over the last several months. I saw rumors from Sean O'Connell, who also works for us and contributes at KSLSports.com, that Ryan Smith at one point had an opportunity to buy into the Phoenix Suns and passed on that opportunity. The fact that he has had options to go out there and be a team owner elsewhere and waited for the Jazz to become available, and it did, I think is a good sign for the fact that they're probably not going to be leaving town anytime soon, even if they're not beholden to this legacy trust.
Right, and he has engraved himself into this community. Obviously, his partnerships, corporate partnerships with BYU Athletics, he's a BYU alumni himself. His company, the one that he founded and is currently acting as the CEO, Qualtrics, is based down in Utah County, just around the corner from Brigham Young University, and he talked about it briefly in his statement earlier today, saying he grew up a part of the Utah Jazz organization as a junior Jazz member. His kids are now playing in junior Jazz, and he's obviously been one of the main corporate and jersey sponsorships over the last handful of years with that 5 for the Fight campaign. So he loves the Utah Jazz, and I think that's important to talk about, because Utah Jazz fans are obviously now very skeptical as to what the future holds under his guidance. But it seems off the get-go anyway that he plans on doing everything he can to try and transform, I guess, this franchise into bigger and better things, which is important. It's worth noting, Ben, we do invite all of our viewers to share comments. We can see all the comments no matter where you're watching, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. Miles Newby has just come through, and I imagine as well, Ben, a lot of these questions will be for you. He says, will the Jazz be more willing to go in luxury tax now with the new owners? They do have some big decisions to make right off the bat, don't they, in regards to Rudy Gobert specifically?
Yeah, so Miles, before we answer your question, let's talk a little bit about kind of the financial situation that these two teams or these two owners now find themselves in. According to Forbes, and look, the Forbes numbers aren't always super accurate to what access these people have to money, what type of money is floating around, what their net worth is. But Forbes today, I wrote in my article, has a real-time valuation for Ryan Smith being worth $1.3 billion. He has the Millers at $1.9 billion. So when we've looked at some of these super powerful owners in the NBA, and to address Miles' question a little bit, that are willing to go into the luxury tax, which can sometimes get up into tens, 20s, millions of dollars, we don't know. Well, we're not sure if Ryan Smith is going to be willing to do that at this point. He doesn't have $10 billion right now to his name, but he did sell his company for $8 billion. So clearly he has cash. He has money on hand and might be more willing to do it if he sees it as an investment opportunity. Just before we went on air, Tom, ESPN reported that the NBA is looking at, a $200 million loss from their conversations with China over the last several months. In total, about a $1.2 billion loss from last season. That could be up to $4 billion by next season if they're not able to get fans in the stands. So those types of financial ramifications are going to exist for a long time, and that could impact Ryan Smith's willingness to go into the luxury tax as much as just his own net worth. I mean, just the return on his investment is going to have a big impact on that. So I think at this point, that's really going to be hard to speculate about whether or not he's dedicated to building a franchise that's a championship contender at all costs, or if he's just trying to keep them financially solvent, which was kind of the Jazz approach under the Millers for so long. So I think some of those questions are going to be difficult to answer right away. I do think one of the reasons, Tom, why this happened now was because they finally found an owner that wasn't a part of an ownership group. They found a guy who's from the state of Utah. They found a guy who I think shares a lot of the Miller family's beliefs and wasn't likely to split up the team or move him out of state. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think that's honestly why they probably originally put the family in the trust. I know there was tax benefits for doing it as well, Tom, but I think one of the fears for Gail Miller was that when the team got passed down to several owners that were the children of the Miller family, there was going to be too many disagreements on what to do with it. The same way if, 4 siblings inherit a house or something like that, it gets hairy, It gets messy. And she didn't want that. So by putting it in this legacy trust, it in fact kind of forced them to work together. And then when they found kind of a sole opportunity with one person, with one voice and one face who had the money and the ability to do this, it seemed like the right time to do it, especially as the NBA is facing all these losses.
The more you think about the timing of all of this, the more it does make sense, Ben. You just have to go back a couple of months when the Larry H. Miller Group announced that they were going to furlough a handful of their staff. Look, there's no denying the fact that we're currently
looks like we may have lost Tom.
There
we go. We got you, Tom. Sorry, we got you. You cut out for a second.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying, look, it was a couple of months ago they announced they were going to furlough a handful of their staff or let people go. They've also talked about, they also own a number of different assets as well. The car dealership is one, for example, that's very important to them. They own a bunch of cinemas. The cinema industry has been struggling greatly over the course of 2020. And so they were in a difficult position as a company financially. And I don't think that's any secret. And I imagine when you get an offer of $1.6 billion, that's incredibly hard to say no to. So look, I think the more you think about it, the more it does make sense. That doesn't neglect the fact that when this news broke, I think it came as a shock to everybody outside of those in that inner circle. But it's exciting. I think it's also scary. And there are a lot of just so many unanswered questions. And I don't know when those questions are going to be answered, Ben. I mean, it might not be some time, if I'm correct. They said this might not go through until the end of the year or closer to the end of the year. So this could be a couple months where we kind of have to sit back, wait, speculate ourselves before Ryan and or Ashley Smith actually answer questions from the media.
I agree. I think one of the things I'm going to keep an eye on, Tom, that's going to give us our first sense of Ryan Smith's ownership decisions is what happens with the extensions for Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert this offseason. They're not required to be signed this year. By all reports, the Jazz have a deal in place already for Donovan Mitchell. Whether that's for 3 years or 5 years, we don't know, but they're going to sign Donovan as quickly as they can. Rudy Gobert is a significantly different question. He becomes an unrestricted free agent next offseason. He could cost significantly more, as much as potentially $250 million on his deal. So there's questions there. Now, while the Millers are technically going to be the owners until the end of the year or whenever the Board of Governors can agree to this, they're not going to be lame duck, kind of just sitting there waiting out their time. I'm sure Ryan Smith's people and Ryan Smith are going to be making these decisions. So if they want to extend Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell and that window to do it expires before the end of the season, Ryan Smith will instruct them on what to do. So we will get a sense, is he willing to pay Rudy Gobert whatever he asks? Do they play hardball and want to keep Rudy Gobert going into next season without a contract extension? Those are very immediate decisions that he's going to have to make and be a part of that I think are going to be big indicators of how he views his role and ownership of this team.
Here's what scares me regarding Ryan and Ashley Smith, but more Ryan, as he'll be the big decision maker. Is you look around the world, there are thousands of professional sports teams out there. You can narrow down the best ownership groups or people pretty easily, and then the best owners in professional sports are the ones that hire professional businessmen to make specific decisions in the best interest of the franchise. And the owners that get themselves in trouble, Ben, are the ones that decide to override other leadership personnel that they have and take it on themselves. It's just too much for them to do, quite frankly. And so my concern would be Ryan has been engraved in the community. He's beloved the Utah Jazz. He's actually gotten to know the players as well. I was able to speak to him pre-pandemic earlier this year. I was trying to get him on the golf show. I failed in doing that, but he was kind of telling me how his relationship with the players are great. And he's like, if you want Mike Conley on the show, which he never came through with, mind you, I know Mike really well. I know Donovan. He's kind of going down the list of all the players that he knows. And so I just fear that he may get himself in a sticky situation when it comes to making too many decisions. And I hope I'm making sense, but I hope he employs certain people to make those decisions for him, and he trusts those people that they're in the best interest of not only himself but the community as well. Miles Newby does ask, will new ownership shake up the front office? I guess that is kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, you're right, Tom. I mean, essentially, the worst owners are the owners that meddle where they should be and don't need to have their hands in things where there are professionals and people who know what they're doing. Now, I think good ownership exists, and I think there are good ownerships who are involved in team operations and not necessarily, draft night or player trades or anything like that. And Ryan Miller's a fan. He's going to know the players in the league on other teams better than I would assume Gail Miller knew who the Phoenix Suns had, who the Golden State Warriors have. He's going to be more involved in that. You're right, though. He will be best served, and teams are best served when they let the Dennis Lindsays of the world do their jobs and the Quinn Snyders of the world do their job. Will there be a shakeup in the front office? I don't think so, not on the front that the Jazz would see. I wouldn't be surprised if you see moves eventually where the Jazz have made recent hires for just, business operations, how they like to run things, what their business format looks like, those strategies. I think those will certainly change. Advertising strategies are bound to change because the Miller family so willingly used the Jazz as a vehicle to advertise their dealerships, their movie theaters, their other business interests. I would be surprised if Ryan Miller does it as much with Qualtrics, or Ryan Smith, does it as much with Qualtrics. I could be wrong. He's certainly not shied away from being a part of the Jazz broadcasts when doing Qualtrics advertisements. But I think some of that stuff will change. I won't be surprised if the Jazz have a more diverse front office and leadership group in the next few years versus what they've had under the Miller family. Not that Gail Miller hasn't been tremendous for the community in the state of Utah, and that's all communities, minorities, white communities. I mean, she's really done a lot to help everybody, but I won't be at all surprised considering some of the moves Qualtrics has made over the last 6 months and what Ryan Smith has said he supports and where he's donated money, if we don't start to see a more diverse even just looking and operating front office for the Utah Jazz in the next little bit. I can't imagine, though, that would change the jobs of Dennis Lindsay, Justin Zanuck, Quinn Snyder, or anything like that. They've done a really terrific job. And one of the things, when we look at RSL, to make a comparison here, and I want to talk about RSL in a moment, Tom, because you just had an article about it. One of the things we generally see when teams go up for sale is owners find themselves in bad financial situations. I know business is tough around the world right now. I don't think the Millers are in a, quote, bad situation. They're not at risk of going bankrupt. Right. They're not selling this team to stay solvent. Or teams get embroiled in controversy, as is the case with RSL. The Jazz aren't in any controversy. They're very steady. They're going to be back to making money in no time. They sold this because it felt like an opportune time. I think it felt like an opportune time for Ryan to really jump in and buy the team. I think that's why they did it. But because you're doing that, Tom, you don't have to go in and shake anything up. You don't have to change owners or management. You don't have to change the coach. You don't have to change the players. The Jazz are in an upward trajectory. Ryan Smith needs to know how to take it to the next level.
Right. And that isn't the same case that's currently going on down at Real Salt Lake. That place was left on fire by Deloy Hansen from all reports. So that's the good news in regards to Ryan Smith and the Utah Jazz. I will say this as well. Like, you know, it's come. I think it's now pretty well known that you don't buy a sports franchise to necessarily make money while owning that sport. I mean, like, you're essentially
not
buying
about your immediate return.
Right. It's like the Millers bought the Utah Jazz for like $18 million and they sell it for $1.66 billion. So you're in the real estate business, in my opinion. You buy the team and you hope that it grows. And the state of Utah is a fantastic opportunity for buyers out there that have enough money to come in and buy the Utah Jazz or to buy Real Salt Lake. It's an economy that's growing. More and more people are coming to the state. I imagine we see cities from Logan all the way down to Las Vegas. By the time my time on planet Earth is done, I imagine the I-15 corridor is far more filled, and I see the economy here growing within the state. So this is an opportunity for Ryan and his family to invest, and it's a long-term investment, as I hope every sports franchise is. But congratulations to the Millers is what I'll say. And then the big question I also have for you, Ben, would be, obviously, and we've kind of touched on the Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell contract situation, but look, there's been speculation for so many years now of Donovan Mitchell leaving the Utah Jazz to potentially go back home over to the East Coast. Does this transition of power, does this give you more of a sense that he'll stay in Utah under Ryan Smith, or do you not have an answer to that at the minute? The reason I ask is obviously we touched on his relationship with the players. And that's not to say that Gail Miller didn't have a relationship with the players, but he seems to be front and center on the side of the court for every game, shaking hands with these players and almost friendly with these players. Like there's a friendship there. They go play golf together, you know, something Gail Miller didn't do. Does this hurt Donovan Mitchell's chances of leaving the state, or too early to tell?
Let me answer it in kind of a big picture, roundabout, speculative way. I think one of the growing issues the NBA is going to have is it's willingly jumped into the political discourse that exists in our country right now. And maybe it all dies down next week. You know, that it's hard to project what we're going to look like a year from now, obviously, with so many crazy things happening in our world. I think ownership, having an ability to engage in that and play that game with no disrespect to, in the terms of calling it a game, but understanding that it is an environment you have to exist in. Having an ability to do that and do it comfortably, which Ryan Smith has done pretty flawlessly, it seems like so far, kind of looking back at his tweets, going over it, knowing how to play the field a little bit and knowing how to express himself in a proper way is a positive for the Jazz. Having owners that can do that is going to be a positive for your community and for your team and the relationship between the community and the team. Because right now, Tom, I mean, we see the responses that Donovan Mitchell gets on his tweets whenever he says anything about race or social justice or culture. He gets attacked by a small but very loud percentage of the community. Having an owner that knows how to deal with that is going to be important. And I would suspect Ryan Smith is pretty well adapted and adjusted to dealing with that on the player side. And I think in that sense, it's probably going to go a long ways towards keeping players in the state of Utah and changing the belief or the understanding or the view that some players do have in the state of Utah, the way Mark Cuban has done that for Dallas and the Dallas Mavericks. That would be my guess as far as just it might feel like a more approachable environment for more NBA players than it has before.
That's good.
Larry H. Miller had issues with that. Larry H. Miller had a ton of controversies off the floor, verbal spats with Karl Malone, issues with his other franchises and organizations as far as social justice and equal rights. He had problems with that. And Gail Miller didn't. Gail Miller really has done a terrific job over the last 11 years of not getting herself or the team into trouble with those types of issues. And so I think I would expect a lot of that to continue with Ryan Smith, and he may be even more forthright with it.
I think that's certainly good to hear because the state of Utah needs that. There have been quite a few controversies, even just around Utah Jazz and the organization over the last handful of years. I do want to touch on Real Salt Lake. When this news broke, Ben, I received a number of tweets kind of asking how this does affect Real Salt Lake, as they're in the process of trying to transition power themselves, and so essentially what I've come to understand, and again, these are all reports. I haven't confirmed all of this, but Ryan Smith was essentially the front runner to take over Real Salt Lake when the news broke that Deloitte was going to sell. I did confirm he actually got a tour of the facility. He's not the only one that's gotten a tour of the Real Salt Lake facilities, but he was one of the first to get in there and check it all out. And so that's kind of neat. But over the past month, I've been told his progress when it comes to buying Real Salt Lake, or Utah Soccer Holdings, as it's officially called, has diminished a tad. And I think that's, now that we know that Ryan Smith is hoping to become a majority owner of the Utah Jazz, I think that makes a fair bit of sense, right? You're looking at buying Real Salt Lake. You're also looking at buying the Utah Jazz. If the Utah Jazz are more forthcoming in moving on proceedings, which clearly they were because they've now announced the move in power, then you're going to focus more of your attention to the Utah Jazz and not so much to Real Salt Lake, who are having a hard time selling their product. So that does make sense. He's still in line to buy Real Salt Lake, like in the sense that he's still capable of doing so, and he wouldn't be the first person to own multiple sports teams, and he won't be the last. There are a number of people out there. Fenway Sports Group owns the Boston Red Sox. They also own Liverpool. They're the majority holder of Liverpool. Tampa Bay Buccaneers owner also owns Manchester United. And then the Rams owner, I think his name's like Stan Kolke. I have it all in my article, but he owns like so many different teams. He owns the Denver Nuggets. He owns the Colorado Rapids. He owns the Colorado Avalanche, which is the NHL affiliate. And he also owns the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, that's like four pretty major sports franchises right there. And they may have a little bit more money than Ryan Smith's net worth, but nonetheless, Ryan Smith can still afford to fork out another $350-400 million to Deloitte Hansen. Deloitte Hansen, by the way, is asking for $500 million, and I think that's going to be difficult for Deloitte to get. I think he's more realistic to be in the realm of receiving 350, maybe if he's lucky and he catches somebody on a good day, he may get 400 out of it. But in the grand scheme of things, Ryan Smith has just paid $1.66 billion to the Utah Jazz, which is a significant hole that he has left in his wallet.
Yeah.
But $350 million, I do believe he can afford to own both. So he may well try and monopolize the professional sports market here in the state of Utah. The Millers did announce that they're going to keep their majority ownership in the Salt Lake Bees. But my point here is Ryan Smith is still in the conversation to own Real Salt Lake, for all those RSL fans out there wondering.
And kind of along those lines of minorship ownership, not that Major League Soccer is minor league, but you talked about the Bees a little bit. The other question I would have, and I'll be curious about, because this has kind of been speculating or has been speculation around the Jazz for a while, and more specifically the Salt Lake City Stars, is that there is desire to build an arena for that team somewhere, because right now they play at the Salt Lake City Community College campus. There's been a desire to build an independent standalone arena for them to play. There's been conversation about it potentially happening in Logan. I know they've talked about up north. Will they go south now, or would they talk about that, since Ryan Smith is from the Orem, Provo area, has ties to the area, obviously has ties to Silicon Slopes? Does he look in that location to potentially build another arena? I think those could be interesting as well. Obviously, if he were to buy RSL, he would inherit half of Harriman. It seems like at that same point, and could be a location to build an arena. So this is going to have broader, long-term implications than just simply a new ownership for the Jazz.
You know what one of my takeaways from today, and it's been a whirlwind, and it's only going to get crazier for all your RSL fans. It's essentially a must-win game tonight at 8:30, and be sure to check out KSLSports.com for more on that. But the power, Ben, of the NBA is on full display, to me anyway, today, in the sense that, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but the $1.66 billion includes Vivint Smart Home Arena, it includes the Utah Jazz, and it includes the G League team, the Stars, who again they play it slick, So they don't even have their own arena, and it includes the training facility or the practice facility. When you compare that to what Deloy Hansen has been able to do down in for Real Salt Lake, I mean, the training facility at Real Salt Lake is immense. Like it's one of the best in the entire country. And I know there was a German team, a pretty big German team, a couple of years ago came to town to play a friendly against Real Salt Lake. They're blown away by the facilities that Real Salt Lake had on offer. I mean, 2 indoor practice fields, which, by the way, is the largest standing sports structure in North America. They've got a charter school. They've got like 6 outdoor fields. They've got another smaller stadium within that same facility, plus Rio Tinto Stadium, which is a pretty impressive stadium in its own right, despite it being a little smaller in size. And that's being sold for somewhere around 350 to 500 million. You look at the power of the NBA, just the name itself, I think, sells 1.66 billion for training facilities that really haven't been updated for that long either. Am I right in saying that, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, they did just build the Zions Bank Basketball Center about 5 years ago now. Maybe it's not quite been that long, which is pretty top of the line, and certainly the big basketball campus they were pushing for. The renovations are done for the arena, so I think they feel comfortable with those. But yeah, I mean, you look at the amount of land that is owned by RSL and the soccer holdings is unbelievable, and certainly unmatched in the state of Utah.
Yeah, anyway. Credit the Millers, and the power of the NBA continues to impress me. Still too many unanswered questions,
yep.
Man. I'm going to go to sleep tonight, having a difficult time turning my brain off as I want to know more, but I feel like we're going to have to wait some time.
One more question, Tom, I want to address. We got on Twitter from JT The Truth. He says, do you think Ryan Smith is buying the team at the high point of the market? Massive ratings decline for the finals that featured LeBron and the Lakers, and the future PR challenges point to declining numbers. No, he's absolutely not. Well, I think the Millers are selling at what they feel is the high point, knowing that there's a chance that it diminishes with the losses coming up over the next few seasons before it will rebuild. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to go up, or we're at this high point right now. We'll probably see a decline, Tom, and then it'll climb back up over the next couple of years. But the NBA is going to find itself not in a bad financial situation. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's going to continue to figure out ways to make money, even though they're going to have to change that currently. But it will bounce back. It will be fine. And he will certainly be in a spot where the team is worth more money in a few years than it is now when he bought it, and is going to continue to look like a wise investment. I just don't think buying sports teams right now is bad, especially when they're set up as well as the Jazz are, with very little competition in the state.
I will go back to kind of finish this conversation. Think about it like you're buying a house, like you're buying real estate to me. And when you look at the real estate graph, I mean, it goes down every now and again, but it goes back right up, and it goes further up than it had before, and it's constantly on an incline. It's why you see so many people nowadays in the state of Utah buying land in central Utah and up in Heber. It's because eventually, over time, long-term investments, those properties, even if there's nothing on them, even if it's just land, for crying out loud, it's going to be worth a ton more down the road than what they are now. It's savvy investing, but at the end of the day, you have to have money to invest in. Credit Ryan Smith. He started Qualtrics, if I'm not mistaken, in his basement.
Yeah.
Ben, I own a basement. I'm in my basement right now. And the only good this basement does is waste my time on the PlayStation 4. I mean, that's as good as it gets for me. So credit him, his family, and everybody close to him. It's impressive.
Yeah, and hopefully the number doesn't climb so high for the Jazz value that he feels like it makes sense to sell, because that's when it can get hairy again. All right, that's a special edition of the KSL Sports front page. Follow Tom's coverage tonight. RSL has a huge game. Follow our continued coverage of Ryan Smith's purchase of the Utah Jazz at KSLSports.com. And we'll be back with you for another KSL Sports front page coming up on Friday. He's Tom Hackett. I'm Ben Anderson. Thanks for jumping on.